Major, the short week in terms of it's your first one, but you've been here. I think you guys had 4 or 5 games last year that were Thursday or Friday. What's the difference in how you prepare, and especially when you're having to prepare for a team like Memphis?
Well, you have to do some of this in the off season. You have to kind of get ahead a little bit off season wise, because you're going to deal with less time, shorter time frame. But Sunday, came back. I had an extended day in the office in terms of game preparation, so Sunday is more like your Monday in terms of game planning. And then we practiced last night, and then we'll obviously practice today and tomorrow, and kind of get back into our normal routine in terms of practice. And the only thing that you do slightly different is, less than 24 or a little bit more than 24 hours after the game is just you're a little smart with your roster and guys being banged up from a game. How much hitting you do earlier in the week.
Just for clarity, how does that work as far as the off day normally being on Monday for the players? Does that just switch to the end of the week this week type
Yes.
deal after the game on Friday?
Mm-hmm.
Major, this is kind of off topic, doesn't have to do with the week, but you had mentioned at your radio show, numbers-wise, you guys are young, and there's some positions where maybe depth isn't as much as you'd want. I believe I counted like 11 guys on the 2 deep that are sophomores or freshmen that are backups, and that's wondering what does that do to you in terms of how you can go out there each week, and is there, I guess, is it a long-term remedy in terms of how you get those numbers back up, and it's just going to be a matter of time and recruiting?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. You have to manage what you have during the season, with your roster and how you practice, and what you can do schematically with some of the depth at some of the positions. But yeah, it's a numbers game, and you've got to be able to build your roster back up to where you have quality depth and experience depth. That's the biggest thing is when you jump from a senior to a redshirt freshman, or you jump from a senior to a true freshman. Those are the holes in the roster that you have to fill through recruiting.
Major, how much is the inconsistency that you get sometimes week to week from the players on offense? How much does that play into the inconsistency as far as your output and all that? Is it just week to week, not knowing really for sure? It's kind of hard to tell which offensive line is going to show up. I think it's arguable the SMU offensive line looked a little bit better out on the field than they did last week. Is there anything that you can do other than just keep continuing to try to focus and get them to work and be a more consistent play to play?
Yeah, you either stay with what you're doing and you get better at it, or you change things, and it's a combination of both, to develop some type of consistency. Sometimes you need to do some things different schematically to help. Sometimes you need to get better and execute as a player. These are things that you have done, you can do, you didn't do, that we've got to get better at. But other times, defensively, offensively, special teams, you've got to look at it from a coach and say, I'm asking him to do something he can't do, so we need to do this. And it's always a combination of those two.
Just to follow up on that too, is it when you come to that point where you feel like something's not going to work and you have to make that change, is that something you've already encountered here as head coach, that you feel like you've had to change some things schematically, or something maybe you're getting to the point where you feel like you may have to consider that if things don't improve in some areas that you're hoping they improve in?
Yeah, that's done day to day, week to week, game to game. You're constantly evaluating, whether it's even after a Sunday practice. Hey, I don't like this matchup. This is not good for whoever's blocking who, or whoever's having to cover who. Let's take this out of the plan. This doesn't fit.
I almost feel like I need to ask you if you're a baseball fan with all the attention's on the Astros.
Don't do that.
But Major, I was curious, how involved are you in game play calling, and is that something that, as a former OCL here as well, that you kind of try to detach yourself and give Brian kind of a free rein, or do you really dive into it game day?
Well, having called plays, during the series, you need to have your plays ready to call, whether it's defense or offense. This is what I want to come back with the next series. So a lot of my questions are after the series. Okay, here's what I saw. Here's what I see. These are some thoughts coming back into the next series. During the series, and unless I see something, completely wrong, I won't chime in, because that's during the series. There's a lot of communication, getting personnels in and out. and you can disrupt the play caller. And the way I liked it is the way I had it the last 2 years in terms of, this is what I saw on that drive. What did you see? Okay, let's talk about what we're coming back with. Here's what I saw in the red zone. Here's what I saw on third down. These are some thoughts. We've talked about these during the week. These are some thoughts. Come back to that.
Well, I guess my follow-up is whether it's execution or just, talent or just situation. Do you feel like, from the standpoint of where you're at now, do you need to get more involved in terms of that, or do you still feel like, let Brian go ahead and?
I think we need to coach better. We need to play better. We need to play like we have at times, where we've been very consistent and we've shown that we can be explosive, like last week. I mean, it doesn't need to be a jerk knee reaction. It's certainly not acceptable to be as inconsistent as we were, whether it's offensively or defensively, from the first to the second half. As a football team, we played a pretty good first half. I mean, we didn't play well enough offensively, but played a pretty good first half. We've got to develop 60 minutes of consistency. And I don't think about, I'm involved with everything. I mean, the head coach, I want to be involved with, what we're doing. I'm not going to call both sides of the football and all special teams calls, but you're going to go through that and talk about the matchups and the personnel groupings and what you're trying to get done. But during the series, you can't have 2 and 3 play callers on any side of the ball. One guy needs to call it, and you need to talk about what we're doing after the series and what we need to come back with and what we need to do more of. It was a good one.
Well, yeah. Well, until I think of it, just Riley Ferguson. I mean, you got a taste of him last year in that offense. Much different, or is it kind of what you saw last year, kind of what you expect to see again this year?
A lot of the same guys returning. The backs are great players. They don't get mentioned because the quarterback has thrown so many touchdowns, and Miller has caught so many balls and made so many plays. But the backs, they've got a great stable of backs that can run the football. They've got a great offensive line. They, because of all the points, they kind of get forgotten, but they do a great job up front. As an offense, they're very difficult to put your hands around because they can do about everything.
Well, this is weird. We should just do this in your office.
Right.
Major, you've been here long enough where sometimes it's been injuries or certain situations, but there's been some losses that maybe weren't expected. You look at maybe the SMU game last year or UConn the year before, and then you guys play really well and up when it's, a Louisville or an Oklahoma. Is there a lesson to be learned from that this week where you're coming off of a tough loss against a team that hadn't had a lot of success, and now you jump into playing the number 25 team in the country?
Yeah, I mean, the message was very clear, yesterday in terms of this is college football, and it really boils down to a staff, its head coach, and the players all understanding every Saturday you have to bring your A game. You have to. I mean, you can point out Iowa State at Oklahoma. How does that happen in Norman? And then they win a big rivalry game the following week. How does LSU lose to Troy and then come back and beat Florida on the road and Auburn at home? How does Clemson play? I mean, that is college football. It's about how you prepare throughout the week to give yourself the best odds on Saturday. But then on Saturday, you have to perform. You have to be disciplined and do what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to do it, when you're supposed to do it. And that's when you start developing some consistency in your play. And then there were opportunities in that game against Tulsa where there's some opportunities that you have to close in on. You have to go up 14-0. You have an opportunity to not necessarily put the game away, but you have the opportunity to impose your will early in the game and let the opponent know this is how the game's going to be. And you don't take advantage of those as an offense. You let teams hang in there. You get somebody pinned back on their 1-yard line to start the third quarter, and they take the ball for 7.5 minutes. You haven't imposed your will as a team. That should be a great opportunity to either get 2 or 7 as a defense, but certainly have them punt the ball back to you at midfield. So you have to bring your A game every week and understand if you don't throw your punches and you let this thing go into late rounds, and it's going to come down to a decision, and it's going to be one you don't want. And it happens week in and week out, and you point it out, but you have to do a better job as a head coach and a better job as a staff to get your players. And your players have to accept responsibility too. Everybody has to understand game day is a game day. We have to play with that level of energy, that level of finish, that level of toughness, that level of discipline to create 60 minutes of consistent football. It's very simple to say, it's very difficult to do, and we've got to do a better job of it because there's been times where we've done it and there's been times where we haven't.
You guys traveled Gerard Carter, we didn't dress out, but is there any update on guys like the ones that you had talked about at the beginning of the year, Carter, Justice, Elif, those guys, and where they're at, or if they have a chance to come back?
Kevin has come back from his foot. Elif will probably still be out and probably will not come back this season because it was a lower back injury and won't be able to come. Gerard was doing some things late last week in practice. Look hopeful for this week. Coming back from the trip from Tulsa, some issues coming back. So just have to see how he responds today at practice and see if he'll be available on Saturday.
And was there anything on Ellis that you could share? Is he, the situation?
Ellis has the same knee injury that he had prior to. Just re-aggravated it.
When's your indoor? Is the indoor facility close, or do you know? They look like they were laying the turf last week.
Probably the first week or second week of November.